The rain came down in sheets so thick that Olivia Foster could barely see 3 feet in front of her. But she stood there anyway, clutching a cardboard suitcase that was rapidly disintegrating in her trembling hands. The water soaked through her cotton dress, plastered her dark hair against her pale cheeks, and mixed with the tears she had been crying since dawn. But she refused to move from that spot on the muddy road leading out of Fort Yuma, California. She had nowhere else to go, no family left to turn to, and the $23 sewn into the lining of her now ruined suitcase represented everything she owned in the world on this miserable day in March of 1882. The sound of hoofbeats splashing through puddles made her look up, squinting against the downpour. A man on horseback was approaching, his wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the rain, a dark oilskin coat protecting him from the worst of the weather. He slowed his horse as he drew near, and Olivia felt a flutter of fear mixed with desperate hope. In her 22 years, she had learned that strangers could be either salvation or damnation, and there was no way to tell which until it was too late. "Madam." The voice was deep and concerned, carrying a hint of Texas drawl. "You cannot stand out here in this weather. Are you hurt?" Olivia tried to speak, but her teeth were chattering so hard that the words came out garbled. She shook her head instead, hugging the disintegrating suitcase tighter against her chest, as if it could shield her from more than just the rain. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, and as he came closer, Olivia could see his face beneath the shadow of his hat. He was young, perhaps 26 or 27, with strong features weathered by sun and wind, a firm jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of warm whiskey that held genuine worry. A scar traced a thin white line along his left cheekbone, but it did not detract from his rugged handsomeness. "My name is Pierce Northwood," he said, keeping a respectful distance but close enough that she could hear him over the drumming rain. "I work at the Triple Bar Ranch about 5 miles north of here. You look like you need help, and I am not the kind of man who rides past a woman standing in a storm holding what is left of a suitcase." Something in his tone, a gentleness that contrasted with his rough appearance, made Olivia's carefully constructed walls crumble. "I have nowhere to go," she managed to say through her chattering teeth. "My aunt died 3 days ago, and the landlord came this morning to claim the house. Everything I owned was in that building, and he gave me 20 minutes to gather what I could carry before he locked the doors." Pierce's jaw tightened with anger, not at her but at the injustice she described. Did he have the legal right to do that? "My aunt had not paid rent in 4 months, Olivia admitted, shame coloring her cheeks. "She was ill for so long, and I spent everything we had on doctors and medicine. I thought if I could just keep her comfortable, if I could just save her, then I could work and earn back what we owed. But she died anyway, and now I have nothing and nowhere, and I thought perhaps I could walk to the next town and find work there. But then the rain started and my suitcase is falling apart and I just—" Her voice broke, and she could not continue. Pierce looked at her for a long moment, and Olivia saw something shift in his expression. It was not pity exactly, but rather a recognition, as if he understood loss and desperation from his own experience. "I cannot leave you here," he said firmly. "The rain is only getting worse, and you will catch pneumonia if you stand out here much longer. My horse can carry us both to the ranch. The owner, Mr. Callahan, is a fair man. He might have worked for you, or at least he will let you dry off and have a hot meal before you make any decisions about what to do next." Olivia hesitated, weighing her options. She knew the dangers of trusting strange men, had heard enough cautionary tales to fill volumes. But she also knew that she would not survive much longer in this rain, and the alternative was to collapse here on this muddy road and hope that the next person who found her was equally kind. "Why would you help me?" she asked, needing to understand his motivation. "You do not know me." "I could be anyone." Pierce met her eyes steadily. "Because 6 years ago my mother stood in a different kind of storm after my father died, and a stranger helped her when everyone else in town turned their backs. I made a promise then that if I ever had the chance to be that kind of person for someone else, I would not let the opportunity pass. So will you let me help you, Miss Foster?" Olivia supplied. "Olivia Foster." "Miss Foster, will you let me offer you a ride and a chance to get out of this rain?" The sincerity in his voice, the steadiness of his gaze, and the bone-deep cold that was seeping into her very soul made the decision for her. Olivia nodded, and Pierce immediately moved into action. He carefully took the soggy cardboard suitcase from her hands and examined it with a frown. "We need to salvage what is inside before this falls apart completely," he said. He walked to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding that stood patiently in the rain, and retrieved a canvas bag from his saddlebag. Working quickly, he transferred the contents of Olivia's ruined suitcase into the waterproof bag. She watched as he handled her few possessions with care and respect, not commenting on how meager they were, not judging her for having so little. When everything was secured, Pierce tied the canvas bag to his saddle and then turned back to Olivia. "Have you ever ridden a horse before?" "A few times when I was younger," she said. "Before my parents died and I came to live with my aunt." Pierce nodded and led the horse closer. "I am going to mount first, and then I will help you up. You will sit in front of me so I can make sure you do not fall. Is that acceptable to you?" Olivia appreciated that he asked, that he made it clear she had a choice even in this small thing. "Yes, thank you." He swung into the saddle with practiced ease, and then extended his hand down to her. Olivia placed her cold, wet hand in his warm, calloused one, and felt him pull her up with surprising gentleness. He settled her in front of him, one arm coming around her waist to hold her steady, the other taking up the reins. "Try to relax," he said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. "I will not let you fall." As they started moving, Olivia became acutely aware of Pierce's solid presence behind her, the strength in the arm that held her securely, the steady rhythm of his breathing. She should have felt vulnerable or frightened, but instead she felt safer than she had in months. The rain continued to pour down, but Pierce's oilskin coat was large enough that it provided some shelter, and the warmth of his body helped chase away the worst of the chill. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the drumming rain, the horses' hoofbeats, and the occasional rumble of thunder in the distance. Olivia's mind raced with questions and worries about what would happen next, but exhaustion was catching up with her. She had not slept properly since her aunt died, had spent the last 3 days making funeral arrangements and trying unsuccessfully to negotiate with the landlord. Now, in the warmth and security of Pierce's arms, the adrenaline that had been keeping her upright began to fade. "Stay awake, Miss Foster," Pierce said gently when he felt her head start to droop. "We are almost there, just a little farther." Olivia forced her eyes open and tried to focus on the landscape around them, though the rain made everything look gray and indistinct. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, hoping conversation would help her stay alert. "What is it like?" Pierce seemed to understand what she was doing and obliged. "The Triple Bar has been operating for about 15 years. Mr. Callahan started it with his brother, though his brother died of cholera 8 years ago. It is not the biggest spread in the territory, but it is well run and profitable. We raise cattle primarily, though Mr. Callahan has been experimenting with horses lately. There are about 20 men who work there year-round, more during roundup and branding season. "And what do you do there?" Olivia asked, genuinely curious despite her exhaustion. "I am the foreman," Pierce said, and she could hear a note of pride in his voice. "I have been working at the Triple Bar for 5 years now, started as a regular ranch hand and worked my way up. Mr. Callahan took a chance on me when I needed it most, and I have tried to prove myself worthy of his trust. What happened 5 years ago that made you need that chance?" The question was perhaps too personal, but the intimacy of their situation, riding together through the storm, seemed to make normal social boundaries less important. Pierce was quiet for a moment, and Olivia thought perhaps she had overstepped. But then he began to speak, his voice low and reflective. "My father died when I was 20, and my mother struggled to keep our small farm going. I was working odd jobs trying to help make ends meet, but it was not enough. A man came around offering to buy the property for a fraction of what it was worth, and when my mother refused, things started happening. Fences got torn down, livestock disappeared, the barn caught fire. We could not prove anything, but we knew who was behind it. What did you do?" Olivia asked softly. "I confronted him," Pierce said. "It was stupid and hot-headed, but I was young and angry. He had hired men backing him up, and I ended up in a fight that I could not win. That is where I got this scar," he added, and Olivia knew he meant the one on his cheek. "I would have ended up in jail or worse, but the sheriff at the time was honest and saw what was really happening. He could not prove the man's involvement in the vandalism, but he made it clear that if anything else happened to our property, there would be consequences. After that, the man lost interest and moved on to easier targets." "But that does not explain how you ended up here," Olivia said. "My mother sold the farm anyway," Pierce continued. "She said she could not live there anymore, could not spend every day waiting for the next bad thing to happen. She moved to San Francisco to live with her sister, and I knew I could not go with her. I needed to find my own way, to prove that I could be more than just someone's son trying to hold onto a failing farm. So I came west, looking for work, and Mr. Callahan hired me despite having no experience with cattle. He said he saw something in me that reminded him of himself at that age. I have been trying to live up to that ever since." Olivia was moved by his honesty, by the vulnerability he showed in sharing his story. "Your mother must be very proud of you." "I hope so," Pierce said. "I write to her regularly, and she writes back telling me about her life in the city. She seems happy there, which is all I ever wanted for her." The rain began to lighten as they crested a hill, and Olivia could see buildings in the distance. The ranch house was a sprawling structure of wood and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings dotted the property, including a large barn, a bunkhouse, and what looked like a cookhouse. Even through the rain, Olivia could see that everything was well maintained, speaking to the care and pride the people here took in their work. Pierce guided the horse toward the main house, and as they approached, a man emerged from the barn, hunching against the rain as he hurried over. "Pierce, thank God you are back. Mr. Callahan has been worried since the storm started." "I am fine, Charlie," Pierce called back. "But we have a guest who needs help. Can you take care of Shadow while I get Miss Foster inside?" "Of course," the man named Charlie said, curiosity evident in his eyes as he looked at Olivia. But he asked no questions, simply took the reins as Pierce dismounted, and then carefully helped Olivia down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, stiff from the ride and weak from exhaustion. Pierce steadied her with a hand on her elbow, and she was grateful for his support as they hurried toward the porch. The front door opened before they reached it, and an older man with gray hair and a weathered face stepped out. "Pierce, what in blazes happened?" You were supposed to be back hours ago, and who is this young lady?" The man's gruff tone was undercut by genuine concern in his blue eyes. "This is Miss Olivia Foster, sir," Pierce said. "I found her standing in the rain on the Fort Yuma Road, and she needs help. May we come in?" The older man, who Olivia assumed was Mr. Callahan, immediately stepped aside. Of course. Come in out of the wet. Margaret," he called toward the back of the house. "We need hot water and dry clothes." The interior of the ranch house was warm and welcoming, with sturdy furniture and colorful rugs that spoke of comfort rather than luxury. Olivia stood dripping on the wooden floor, suddenly acutely aware of what a mess she must look. A woman appeared from a doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50, with kind brown eyes and graying brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Mercy, look at the state of you both," she said, but there was no censure in her voice, only concern. "Come with me, dear," she said to Olivia. "Let us get you into something dry before you catch your death." Olivia glanced at Pierce, suddenly reluctant to leave the security of his presence. He seemed to understand and gave her an encouraging nod. "Go ahead, Miss Foster. Margaret will take good care of you. I will be here when you are ready to talk." Margaret led Olivia through the house to a bedroom that was clearly hers, comfortable and feminine without being fussy. She helped Olivia out of her wet clothes, wrapping her in a warm robe while she heated water for a bath. "Mr. Northwood found you in the storm?" Margaret asked as she worked, her tone conversational but not prying. "Yes," Olivia said. "I was in a difficult situation and he offered to help when he did not have to." "That sounds like Pierce," Margaret said with obvious affection. "He has a good heart, that one. Been a blessing to this ranch and to Mr. Callahan especially. Now, let us get you properly warmed up." The bath was heavenly, hot water that gradually chased away the bone-deep chill. Margaret provided soap that smelled of lavender and a towel that was soft and clean. When Olivia finally emerged, Margaret had laid out a simple dress of blue cotton. "It was my daughter's," she explained. "She is married now and living in Sacramento, but she left some of her things here. You look to be about her size, so please use whatever you need." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes at this kindness from a complete stranger. "I do not know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," Margaret said firmly. "We help each other out here. It is how we survive. Now, do you feel well enough to join the men in the sitting room? They will want to know your story, and then we can figure out how best to help you." Olivia nodded, and Margaret led her back through the house to a comfortable room where Pierce and Mr. Callahan were waiting. Pierce had changed out of his wet clothes as well, now wearing dry denim and a clean shirt. He stood when she entered, and she saw relief in his eyes. "Miss Foster, please sit," Mr. Callahan said, gesturing to a chair near the fireplace where a warm fire burned. "Pierce has told me a bit about how he found you, but I would like to hear the full story from you if you are up to it." Olivia sat, grateful for the warmth of the fire, and began to tell her story. She explained about her parents dying of influenza when she was 16, how she had come to live with her aunt in Fort Yuma. She spoke of her aunt's long illness, the mounting debts, and finally her death 3 days ago. She told them about the landlord's callousness, giving her mere minutes to gather her belongings before locking her out of the only home she had known for 6 years. "I thought I could walk to the next town," she said, her voice small. "Find work as a seamstress or a cook or anything really. But the rain started and my suitcase fell apart and I just stood there not knowing what to do next, and then Pierce found me." Mr. Callahan was quiet for a moment, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "Can you cook?" the question surprised Olivia. "Yes, sir. My aunt taught me. I helped her with her baking business before she became too ill to work." Can you clean, do laundry, mend clothes? Yes, sir. I have been keeping house since I was 16. Mr. Callahan glanced at Pierce, some unspoken communication passing between them, and then looked back at Olivia. My wife died 2 years ago, and Margaret has been trying to manage the household along with cooking for the ranch hands. It is too much work for one person, and she has been asking for help. If you are willing, I can offer you a position as a housekeeper and assistant cook. Room and board plus $30 a month. You would have your own room in the house and you would take your meals with the family. Does that sound acceptable? Olivia could hardly believe what she was hearing. You would do that. But you do not know me. How can you trust me? Pierce trusts you, Mr. Callahan said simply. And I trust Pierce's judgment. He would not have brought you here if he thought you were anything other than what you appear to be. A young woman who has had some terrible luck and deserves a chance to get back on her feet. Besides, Margaret will vouch for my character if you need reassurance. I am demanding but fair, and I do not tolerate any impropriety in my household. Pierce spoke up then, his voice gentle. You would be safe here, Miss Foster. Mr. Callahan runs a respectable operation, and any man who stepped out of line would answer to me personally. There was something in the way he said it, a quiet intensity that made Olivia believe him absolutely. She looked between the two men, saw genuine kindness in their faces, and felt something loosen in her chest. For the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe properly. I accept, she said. Thank you both so much. Good, Mr. Callahan said, standing. Then that is settled. Margaret will show you to your room after dinner. Tonight you will rest, and tomorrow we will get you properly situated. Welcome to the Triple Bar, Miss Foster. I hope you will be happy here. Dinner that evening was a revelation for Olivia. The long table in the kitchen was filled with ranch hands, all hungry men who had worked hard all day, despite the rain. Margaret served hearty beef stew with fresh bread, and Olivia noticed how the men were respectful and polite, thanking Margaret for the food and keeping their conversations appropriate. Pierce sat at the head of the table opposite Mr. Callahan, and Olivia could see the respect the other men had for him. They asked his opinion on various matters, deferred to his judgment, and clearly valued his leadership. Margaret had insisted Olivia sit and eat rather than help serve, saying she needed to regain her strength. The food was delicious, and Olivia ate more than she had in days, not realizing how hungry she had been. Throughout the meal, she found her eyes drifting to Pierce, watching the way he interacted with the men, the easy confidence he had, the occasional smile that transformed his serious face into something approaching boyishness. Once, he caught her looking, and their eyes met across the table. He did not look away or act uncomfortable. Instead, he gave her a small, reassuring smile that made warmth bloom in her chest. Olivia quickly looked down at her plate, feeling her cheeks heat, but she could not help the small smile that tugged at her own lips. After dinner, Margaret showed Olivia to her room, a small but comfortable space on the second floor of the house. It had a real bed with clean sheets, a dresser, a washstand, and even a small window that looked out over the ranch grounds. To Olivia, who had been sleeping on a straw mattress in her aunt's cramped house, it looked like paradise. I brought up your belongings, Margaret said, gesturing to the canvas bag sitting on the dresser. Pierce made sure everything was dried off as best as could be. You should check and make sure nothing was ruined. Olivia opened the bag and carefully examined the contents. Her clothes were damp but intact, as was the small jewelry box that contained her mother's wedding ring and a locket with pictures of her parents. The money she had sewn into the lining of her old suitcase was still there, $23 that represented every penny she had saved. It was not much, but it was hers, and she was grateful Pierce had been careful enough to preserve it. "Everything is fine," she told Margaret. "Please tell Pierce I said thank you for taking such care." "You can tell him yourself tomorrow," Margaret said with a knowing smile. "Now you should get some rest. We start early around here and you will need your strength. If you need anything during the night, my room is just down the hall and Mr. Callahan's is at the end. You are safe here, dear. No one will bother you." After Margaret left, Olivia changed into a nightgown that Margaret had provided, another hand-me-down from her daughter. She climbed into the bed, sinking into a real mattress for the first time in longer than she cared to remember, and pulled the warm quilts up to her chin. The rain had stopped, and through the window, she could see stars beginning to appear in the clearing sky. She should have fallen asleep immediately, exhausted as she was, but her mind kept replaying the events of the day. This morning, she had been standing in the rain with no hope and no future. Tonight, she was lying in a comfortable bed in a safe place with the promise of work and a fresh start. And all because a cowboy named Pierce Northwood had not been the kind of man who could ride past someone in need. Olivia thought about the way he had looked at her during dinner, the protectiveness in his voice when he promised she would be safe, the gentleness of his hands as he had helped her onto his horse. She barely knew him, had spent only a few hours in his company, but already she felt drawn to him in a way she had never experienced before. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "He was just being kind. You are confusing gratitude with something else. Do not be foolish." But as she finally drifted off to sleep, it was Pierce's warm, whiskey-colored eyes that followed her into her dreams. The next morning, Olivia woke to the sound of roosters crowing and men's voices calling to each other outside. Dawn light was just beginning to filter through her window, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. For a moment, she was disoriented, not recognizing her surroundings, and then memory flooded back. The rain, Pierce, the triple bar, her new job. She rose quickly, washing her face in the basin and dressing in one of the simple dresses Margaret had provided. Her own clothes were still damp, hanging by the window where she had spread them out the night before. She brushed her long, dark hair and pinned it up in a practical style, then made her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee and bacon. Margaret was already in the kitchen, stirring a large pot of oatmeal on the stove. She looked up when Olivia entered and smiled. "Good morning, dear." "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Olivia admitted. "What can I do to help?" "Well, you are eager to start," Margaret said approvingly. "Why don't you set the table? The men will be in soon and they are always hungry in the morning." Olivia set to work, finding plates and utensils and arranging them along the long table. As she worked, ranch hands began filtering in, politely greeting her and Margaret before taking their seats. Pierce was one of the last to arrive, his hair still damp from washing, his face freshly shaved. He met Olivia's eyes as he entered, and she saw warmth there that made her heart skip. "Good morning, Miss Foster," he said. "I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, proud that her voice came out steady. "And thank you again for everything you did yesterday." "I am not sure I properly expressed my gratitude." "No thanks needed," Pierce said, echoing Margaret's words from the day before. "I am just glad I came along when I did." Breakfast was another hearty affair with oatmeal, bacon, eggs, and fresh bread. Olivia helped Margaret serve and then joined them at the table. She was hyper-aware of Pierce's presence, even though he sat several seats away. She noticed the way he spoke respectfully to Margaret, the way he praised the food, the way he listened attentively when one of the younger ranch hands asked him a question about the day's work. After breakfast, Mr. Callahan took Olivia aside to explain her duties. She would help Margaret with cooking 3 meals a day for the household and ranch hands, do laundry twice a week, keep the main house clean and organized, and assist with any other household tasks as needed. It was hard work, but it was honest work, and Olivia threw herself into it with determination. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Olivia rose early to help Margaret prepare breakfast, then spent the morning on various household tasks. She discovered she enjoyed the work, found satisfaction in the tangible results of her efforts. The ranch hands were respectful and appreciative, always thanking her for meals and making an effort to keep their mess to a minimum. Mr. Callahan was indeed demanding but fair, offering praise when something was done well and constructive criticism when it was not. And Pierce was always there, a steady presence that Olivia found herself looking for throughout the day. He would come in from working on the ranch with his shirt sleeves rolled up and dust on his boots, and Olivia's heart would do a little flip in her chest. He always had a kind word for her, would ask how her day was going, would carry heavy things without being asked and hold doors open with old-fashioned courtesy. 2 weeks after Olivia arrived at the Triple Bar, Pierce approached her after dinner as she was washing dishes in the kitchen. Margaret had already retired for the evening and most of the ranch hands were in the bunkhouse or in town. Olivia was alone, humming softly to herself as she worked, when she heard his voice behind her. "Miss Foster, do you have a moment?" She turned, wiping her hands on her apron. "Of course, Mr. Northwood. What can I do for you?" He looked slightly uncomfortable, and Olivia realized with surprise that he was nervous. "I was wondering if you might like to take a walk with me. It is a beautiful evening, and I thought you might enjoy seeing more of the ranch. You have been working so hard since you arrived, and I thought perhaps you could use a break." Olivia's pulse quickened. This felt different from their casual interactions over meals or passing in the hallway. This felt intentional, like something that could be the beginning of something more. "I would like that very much," she said softly. Pierce's face relaxed into a smile, and Olivia marveled at how it transformed him. "Good. Let me just tell Mr. Callahan where we will be, and then we can go." They walked out into the evening together, the air still warm from the day but beginning to cool. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of orange and purple as the sun set behind the distant mountains. Pierce led her toward the corrals where several horses were grazing peacefully. "This is my favorite time of day," Pierce said as they walked. "After all the work is done but before it gets fully dark. Everything feels peaceful, like the world is taking a breath before night falls." "It is beautiful here," Olivia agreed. "So different from Fort Yuma. I never realized how much I would enjoy being out away from town." They reached the corral fence and leaned against it, watching the horses. Pierce pointed out his horse, Shadow, the bay gelding who had carried them through the rain that first day. "He is a good horse, steady and smart. I bought him with my first year's wages from the ranch." "You must have worked very hard to afford him," Olivia said. "I did," Pierce acknowledged, "but he was worth it. A cowboy without a good horse is like a carpenter without tools. Shadow has saved my life more than once when cattle got spooked or when I had to navigate difficult terrain." They were quiet for a moment, comfortable in the silence. Then Pierce said, "May I ask you a personal question, Miss Foster?" "Yes," Olivia said, curious where this was leading. "Do you have any family left? Anyone you should write to and let know where you are?" Olivia shook her head. "No, my aunt was the last. My father was an only child, and my mother's only sibling was her sister, my aunt. There were some distant cousins on my father's side, but I do not even know where they are now." "I am sorry," Pierce said. "That must be lonely." "It is," Olivia admitted, "but being here has helped. Margaret and Mr. Callahan have been so kind, and all the men have made me feel welcome." I feel less alone than I have in a very long time." Pierce turned to face her, and Olivia's breath caught at the intensity in his eyes. "I am glad you feel that way. I have been wanting to tell you something, but I was not sure if it was too soon or if I would be overstepping." "What is it?" Olivia asked, her heart pounding. "From the moment I saw you standing in that rain, something in me recognized something in you," Pierce said. "I know that probably sounds strange or too forward, but it is the truth. I have not been able to stop thinking about you, and it is not just because I want to make sure you are settling in well. It is more than that." Olivia felt like all the air had left her lungs. "I have been thinking about you too," she confessed. "I kept telling myself it was just gratitude, that I was confusing thankfulness with something else. But every time I see you, my heart speeds up, and when you smile at me, I feel warm all over. I did not want to presume anything, did not want to make things awkward when you were just being kind." Pierce reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, his fingers gentle as they wrapped around hers. "It is not just kindness, Olivia. May I call you Olivia?" "Yes," she whispered. "And may I call you Pierce?" "I would like that very much," he said, his thumb stroking across the back of her hand in a gesture that was both innocent and incredibly intimate. "I want to court you properly, if you will let me. I know we have not known each other long, but I have never felt this way about anyone before, and I do not want to let the opportunity pass because I was too cautious or too afraid." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I would very much like for you to court me, Pierce." His smile was radiant, and he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles that sent shivers racing up her arm. "Then that is what I will do. I will court you properly, and I will show you every day that my feelings are genuine and lasting." They stood there together as the sun finished setting and the first stars appeared, hands clasped and hearts full. Olivia thought about how her life had changed so dramatically in such a short time, how despair had transformed into hope, how loneliness was becoming connection. And at the center of it all was this man who had offered her a ride and, without even knowing it, a reason to stay. Over the following weeks, Pierce courted Olivia with old-fashioned dedication. He would bring her wildflowers he found while riding the range, leaving them on the kitchen windowsill for her to discover. He would seek her out in the evenings after his work was done, and they would take walks together, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood in Texas, about his dreams of one day having his own ranch. She told him about her parents, about the happy memories she had of them before they died, about her aunt's kindness in taking her in when she had nowhere else to go. Margaret noticed, of course, and gave Olivia knowing looks and encouraging smiles. Mr. Callahan noticed too, but he seemed pleased rather than concerned. One day, he pulled Pierce aside after lunch. "I see how things are developing between you and Miss Foster," he said bluntly. "I want to make sure your intentions are honorable." Pierce met his employer's eyes steadily. "They are, sir. I care for her deeply, and I intend to marry her if she will have me." Mr. Callahan nodded, satisfied. "Good. She is a fine young woman who has had a hard time of things. She deserves someone who will treat her right. Just make sure you do not let your personal life interfere with your work." "I would never, sir," Pierce said firmly. "I know you would not," Mr. Callahan said, clapping him on the shoulder. "That is why I am not worried. You have my blessing, for what it is worth." 2 months after Olivia arrived at the Triple Bar, Pierce asked her to marry him. It was a beautiful June evening, warm but not too hot, with a breeze carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. He had asked her to walk with him after dinner, and he led her to a spot overlooking a valley where the ranch's cattle grazed peacefully. "This is the first piece of land I want to buy," he told her. When I have saved enough money, I want to start my own ranch, something I can build from the ground up. I have been working toward this dream for years, saving every penny I could spare." "It is beautiful," Olivia said, imagining the possibilities. "You would do well here." Pierce turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. "The thing is, I do not want to do it alone. These past 2 months with you have shown me what my life has been missing. You make me want to be better, work harder, dream bigger. You make me believe that anything is possible as long as we are together." He dropped to one knee and Olivia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Olivia Foster, I love you with everything I am. I know I do not have much to offer yet, but I promise I will spend every day of my life working to give you the life you deserve. Will you marry me? Will you build this dream with me?" Tears were streaming down Olivia's face, but she was smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. "Yes. Yes, Pierce, I will marry you. I love you so much." Pierce stood and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and Olivia felt like her heart might burst with happiness. They were married 1 month later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Fort Yuma. Margaret helped Olivia make a dress of white cotton with lace trim, and Mr. Callahan gave her away, walking her down the aisle with pride evident on his weathered face. The ranch hands attended, all dressed in their Sunday best, and cheered when the minister pronounced Pierce and Olivia husband and wife. The reception was held at the ranch, with Margaret and several of the ranch wives preparing a feast. There was music and dancing, and Olivia danced with Pierce under the stars, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. When Pierce held her close and whispered, "I love you," Mrs. Northwood in her ear, she thought her heart might overflow with joy. Mr. Callahan had given them a small cabin on the ranch property as a wedding gift, a cozy 2-room structure that Pierce had spent the last month fixing up and furnishing. It was not much, but it was theirs, and Olivia loved it immediately. That first night, as Pierce carried her over the threshold and then kissed her thoroughly, she marveled at how much her life had changed. "Are you happy?" Pierce asked later as they lay together in their new bed, Olivia's head resting on his chest and his arm around her shoulders. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she told him honestly. "When I think about where I was just a few months ago, standing in that rain with no hope, and now I am here with you, married and loved and safe, it feels like a dream." "It is not a dream," Pierce said, kissing the top of her head. "This is real and it is forever. I am never letting you go, Olivia. You are mine and I am yours until the day we die. And maybe even after that," Olivia said softly. Pierce laughed, a warm, rumbling sound that she felt through his chest. "Definitely after that. I plan to love you through eternity." Olivia continued working at the ranch house, now as a married woman, and Pierce continued as foreman. But everything felt different now, better. Olivia would look up from kneading bread and see Pierce riding past the window, and their eyes would meet and hold for a moment of perfect understanding. He would come home in the evenings, and she would be there waiting, and the simple domesticity of sharing a meal and talking about their days felt like the greatest gift. They fell into comfortable routines, learned each other's habits and preferences, navigated the small conflicts that all new marriages face with patience and humor. Pierce was careful to include Olivia in his plans for the future, discussing his savings and his timeline for buying land. Olivia shared her own ideas, suggesting they could raise chickens and maybe some pigs alongside the cattle, diversifying their income. 6 months into their marriage, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be sure before she told Pierce. When she finally shared the news with him one evening after dinner, his reaction was everything she had hoped for. His face lit up with joy, and he picked her up and spun her around, laughing and whooping with delight. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "Olivia, we are going to be parents, I know," she said, laughing through happy tears. "Are you ready for this?" "I have never been more ready for anything in my life," Pierce said, pulling her close and resting his forehead against hers. "You and this baby, you are my whole world. Everything I do is for you." The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester, and the desert heat of the summer made her uncomfortable and swollen. But Pierce was attentive and caring, bringing her cool water and fanning her when she was hot, rubbing her feet when they ached and talking to her belly at night, telling their unborn child stories about the ranch and the life they would have. Mr. Callahan insisted that Olivia reduce her work hours as her pregnancy progressed, and he hired another woman from town to help Margaret with the heavier tasks. Olivia was grateful, even as she chafed a bit at being treated like fragile porcelain. But she knew everyone was just concerned for her well-being, and she appreciated their care. In March of 1883, exactly 1 year after Pierce found her in the rain, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, with Margaret and a midwife from town attending to her while Pierce paced anxiously outside. When he was finally allowed in and saw his wife holding their son, tears streamed down his face. "He is perfect," Pierce whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one gentle finger. "He looks just like you." "He has your nose," Olivia said, exhausted but happy. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had not been able to agree on anything definitive. Now, looking at their son's tiny, perfect face, Pierce said, "What about William? After your father?" Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Her father's name had been William, and the fact that Pierce wanted to honor him touched her deeply. "William Northwood. I love it." "William Northwood it is," Pierce said, carefully taking the baby from Olivia and cradling him against his chest. "Welcome to the world, son. Your mama and I have been waiting for you." The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights and steep learning curves as they figured out how to be parents. William was a relatively easy baby, but he was still a baby with all the demands that entailed. Olivia was tired constantly, but she had never been happier. Watching Pierce with their son, seeing the gentle way he held him and the pride in his eyes, made her fall in love with him all over again. Pierce was hands-on in a way that surprised some of the ranch hands. He would get up in the middle of the night when William cried, would change diapers without complaint, would walk the floor for hours rocking his son when nothing else would calm him. He made it clear that being William's father was just as important as being the ranch foreman, and he would not let anyone suggest otherwise. When William was 6 months old, Pierce came home one evening with news that made Olivia's heart soar. "I did it," he said, sweeping her into his arms. "I bought the land. That valley I showed you where I wanted to start our ranch. It is ours now, Olivia. We own it." "Pierce, that is wonderful," Olivia exclaimed, kissing him soundly. "How? I thought you needed at least another year to save enough." "Mr. Callahan helped me," Pierce admitted. "He gave me a loan for part of the purchase price, said I could pay him back over time. He said he has been planning to retire in a few years anyway, and he wants me to take over running the Triple Bar when he does. This way, I can start building our own place while still working here, and when the time comes for the transition, we will be in a good position." It was more than they had dared to hope for. Over the next 2 years, Pierce worked tirelessly to build their ranch while continuing his duties at the Triple Bar. He hired a few men to help with construction, and slowly, their ranch house took shape. It was modest but well built, with 3 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a front porch that looked out over their land. Olivia helped as much as she could, managing William and contributing ideas for the house's layout and design. She planted a vegetable garden and started a small flock of chickens, just as she had suggested years before. The chickens did well, and soon she was selling eggs in town, bringing in a small but steady income that helped offset their expenses. When William was 2.5, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Pierce was just as attentive as he had been the first time, just as excited and nervous. Their daughter was born in October of 1885. A tiny, perfect girl with dark hair like her mother and her father's whiskey-colored eyes. They named her Sarah, and William was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Pierce would often come home to find his son sitting next to Olivia while she nursed Sarah, singing to his sister in a sweet, off-key voice that made Olivia's heart melt. By 1886, their ranch was operational. They had a small herd of cattle, Olivia's chickens, and 2 pigs that she had bought from a farmer in town. It was not much compared to the Triple Bar, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and their own sweat. Pierce still worked as foreman for Mr. Callahan, but he spent every spare moment on their own land, building fences, clearing brush, and planning for the future. Mr. Callahan announced his retirement in the spring of 1887, and as promised, he offered Pierce the position of ranch manager for the Triple Bar. It came with a significant increase in pay and the option to eventually buy into the ranch as a partner. Pierce accepted gratefully, and he and Olivia discussed how this would affect their own ranch. "We can keep building our place," Pierce said. "Use the extra income to buy more cattle, expand the herd. In a few years, when the Triple Bar is running smoothly and we have someone we can trust as foreman, we can focus more on our own operation." It was a good plan, practical and realistic. But more than that, it showed how far they had come from that rainy day when Pierce had found Olivia on the road. They had built a life together, a real life with children and land and dreams that were coming true. One evening in late 1887, after the children were asleep, and they were sitting on the porch of their ranch house watching the sunset, Olivia turned to Pierce and said, "Do you remember the day we met?" Pierce smiled, taking her hand and lacing their fingers together. "Every detail. You were standing in the rain, soaked to the bone, holding that cardboard suitcase that was falling apart. You looked so lost and so brave at the same time. I knew I could not just ride past you." "I thought I was at the end of everything," Olivia said. "I had lost my aunt, my home, everything I owned. I did not think there was any way forward, and then you appeared, like some kind of answer to a prayer I had not even thought to say." "I was just a cowboy offering a ride," Pierce said. "You were so much more than that," Olivia corrected gently. "You offered me hope when I had none. You gave me a reason to believe that things could get better, that I could have a future worth living. You saved my life, Pierce, in every way that matters." Pierce pulled her close, kissing her temple. "You saved mine too. I did not even realize how lonely I was until I met you. I had work and purpose, but I did not have anyone to share it with. You gave my life meaning beyond just getting through each day. You gave me a family, a home, a reason to dream bigger than I ever had before." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to deep purple. Inside the house, they could hear William talking in his sleep, and Sarah made a small sound in her cradle. These were the sounds of home, of family, of a life well lived. "I want more," Olivia said suddenly. Pierce looked at her surprised. "More what?" More children, she clarified. More mornings waking up next to you, more evenings watching the sunset together, more years of building this life we have created. I want to grow old with you, Pierce Northwood, and I want to fill this house with love and laughter and memories. Pierce's smile was tender and full of promise. Then that is exactly what we will do, Mrs. Northwood. We will fill our years with more of everything good, and when we are old and gray, we will sit on this porch and remember how it all started with a rainstorm and a chance encounter that changed everything. It was not chance, Olivia said softly. It was fate. It was meant to be. Maybe you are right, Pierce agreed. Maybe the universe knew we needed each other and arranged for us to meet at exactly the right moment. Either way, I am grateful every day that I decided to ride that particular road on that particular day. Over the next several years, their family continued to grow. Olivia gave birth to another son in 1889, whom they named Thomas, and then twin girls in 1891, named Emma and Grace. Their house was full of noise and laughter and chaos, and Olivia had never been happier. Pierce was a devoted father, somehow finding time in his busy schedule to play with the children, teach them about the ranch, and be present for all the important moments of their young lives. The ranch prospered under their care. Pierce's management of the Triple Bar was exemplary, and their own herd grew steadily. By 1893, they had enough cattle that they needed to hire additional help, young men who reminded Pierce of himself at that age, eager to work hard and prove themselves. He treated them fairly, remembered his own struggles, and often gave them opportunities to learn and grow beyond just basic ranch work. Olivia's egg business had expanded as well. She now had over 50 chickens and was supplying several stores in Fort Yuma and the surrounding towns. She had also started a small baking business, selling bread and pies to supplement their income. Between Pierce's salary from the Triple Bar, the profits from their own cattle, and Olivia's various enterprises, they were doing well financially, better than either of them had ever dreamed. But success brought new challenges. Pierce was working long hours trying to manage both ranches, and Olivia worried about him wearing himself out. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes at the end of long days, the way his shoulders slumped when he thought no one was looking. One night, after he came home particularly late and weary, she confronted him gently. "You are working too hard," she said, helping him out of his boots. "You need to slow down before you make yourself sick." "I am fine," Pierce insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "There is just a lot to do right now. Roundup at the Triple Bar, fencing that needs repairing here, the new cattle to manage. It will ease up soon." "That is what you said 3 months ago," Olivia pointed out. "Pierce, I love you, and I am so proud of everything you have accomplished. But none of it matters if you work yourself to death. We need you healthy and happy, not exhausted and miserable." Pierce sighed, pulling her down onto his lap and wrapping his arms around her. "I know you are right. I just want to give you and the children everything you deserve. I want to build something that will last, that will provide for our family for generations." "We already have that," Olivia said, cupping his face in her hands. "We have each other, we have healthy children, we have land and cattle and a home. Yes, we want to keep building, but not at the expense of your health or our family time. The children miss you, Pierce. William asked me yesterday why you are never home anymore." That hit Pierce hard. Olivia could see it in his eyes, the guilt and the realization that he had been so focused on providing that he had neglected being present. "You are right," he said finally. "I have been so caught up in the work that I lost sight of why I am doing it. Tomorrow, I am going to talk to Mr. Callahan about hiring another foreman for the Triple Bar. I have been running both operations alone for too long. It is time to delegate more responsibility." True to his word, Pierce had that conversation, and within a month, a competent man named Daniel Harris had been hired as assistant foreman at the Triple Bar. It took some of the pressure off Pierce, allowing him to come home at reasonable hours and spend more time with his family. The change was immediate and positive. The children blossomed with more attention from their father, and Olivia felt like she had her husband back. In 1895, Mr. Callahan passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73. It was a blow to everyone who had known him. This gruff but kind man who had given so many people chances they did not deserve on paper, but proved they deserved through hard work and dedication. He left the Triple Bar to Pierce in his will, recognizing the years of loyal service and the way Pierce had elevated the ranch's reputation and profitability. Pierce was overwhelmed by this final gesture of trust and respect. At the reading of the will, he had to step outside to compose himself, and Olivia followed, wrapping her arms around him as he wept. "He believed in me when no one else did," Pierce said through his tears. "He gave me a chance to prove myself, and he never wavered in his support. I do not know if I can live up to his expectations." "You already have," Olivia said firmly. "He left you the ranch because he knew you would care for it the way he did, because he trusted you to honor his legacy. And you will, Pierce. I have no doubt about that." Managing the Triple Bar as owner rather than just foreman was a significant responsibility, but Pierce rose to the challenge. He implemented new breeding practices, modernized some of the equipment, and continued to treat his employees with the fairness and respect that Mr. Callahan had modeled. The ranch continued to prosper, and Pierce's reputation as an honest and skilled rancher spread throughout the territory. Their own ranch, which they had named the Northwood Ranch, continued to grow as well. By 1898, they had over 200 head of cattle and had expanded their land holdings through careful purchases of adjacent properties. William, now 15, was actively involved in the ranch operations, showing a natural aptitude for cattle work that made Pierce proud. Sarah, at 12, preferred working with her mother on the chickens and baking, but she was equally valuable to the family enterprise. Olivia looked at her life sometimes and marveled at how different it was from those dark days when she had stood in the rain with nothing. She had a loving husband who still looked at her with the same warmth and desire he had when they first courted. She had 5 healthy, happy children who were growing into good, responsible people. She had a home she loved, work that fulfilled her, and a community that respected and valued her. One day in the spring of 1900, Olivia and Pierce took a rare day off from work to ride out to the valley where Pierce had proposed 18 years earlier. They had not been back in years, too busy with the demands of ranching and raising children. But their oldest was now capable of watching the younger ones for a day, and they needed time alone together. They spread a blanket under a cottonwood tree and lay side by side, looking up at the blue sky through the branches. They were both in their 40s now, with lines on their faces and gray threading through their hair, but to each other, they were still the young people who had fallen in love on this very spot. "You ever wish things had turned out differently?" Pierce asked, a question that surprised Olivia. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you could have gone to a different town that day. Someone else could have found you. Your life could have taken a completely different path. Do you ever wonder what that would have been like?" Olivia rolled onto her side, propping herself up on one elbow to look at him. "Not even once. Not even for a second. Every single thing that has happened, good and bad, has led me to this moment right here with you. If I changed anything, I might not have this life, and this life is everything I ever wanted even though I did not know it until I had it." Pierce reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so familiar and tender that it made Olivia's heart squeeze. "I love you more now than I did when I married you, and I did not think that was possible. You have given me everything, Olivia, everything that matters." "You gave me the same," she said softly. "You offered me a ride that day, but you also offered me a reason to stay, a reason to hope, a reason to believe that life could be good again. And you have spent every day since proving that my faith in you was justified." They kissed there under the cottonwood tree, a sweet, lingering kiss that spoke of years of love and commitment, of challenges faced together and triumphs shared. When they finally pulled apart, Olivia rested her head on Pierce's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. Promise me that we will do this again. That no matter how busy life gets, we will make time to remember where we started and how far we have come. Promise me we will never take this for granted." "I promise," Pierce said solemnly. "I will never take you or this life for granted, Olivia, not as long as I live." The years continued to pass, marked by the usual joys and sorrows of life. William married a nice girl from town in 1903 and started his own small ranch with his father's help. Sarah married in 1906, choosing a schoolteacher who loved her fierce independence and intelligence. The younger children were growing up fast, Thomas showing an interest in horses and breeding, while Emma and Grace were inseparable twins who helped their mother with increasing competence. Pierce and Olivia became grandparents in 1904 when William's wife gave birth to a son they named Michael. Holding his grandson for the first time, Pierce cried openly, overwhelmed by the continuation of the family line he and Olivia had started. More grandchildren followed over the years, filling family gatherings with noise and laughter and chaos that Olivia loved. The ranches continued to prosper into the new century. The Triple Bar and the Northwood Ranch were now both well-established operations with excellent reputations. Pierce had trained Daniel Harris to eventually take over day-to-day management of the Triple Bar, allowing Pierce to focus more on the Northwood Ranch as he got older. It was a gradual transition, but by 1910, Pierce had largely stepped back from active management of the Triple Bar while maintaining ownership. In 1912, on their 30th wedding anniversary, Pierce surprised Olivia with a trip to San Francisco to visit his mother. Margaret had passed away several years earlier, and Pierce's mother was now in her 80s, frail but still sharp-minded. She welcomed Olivia with open arms, thanking her for making her son so happy and for giving her such beautiful grandchildren. They spent a week in the city, seeing sights and enjoying the luxury of having no responsibilities beyond enjoying each other's company. It was different from their life on the ranch, exciting in its own way, but both of them were eager to return home by the end of the week. "I could never live in a city," Olivia said as they took the train back to Arizona. "Too many people, too much noise, too much of everything." "I feel the same," Pierce agreed. "Give me wide, open spaces and honest work any day, although it was nice to visit." "It was," Olivia agreed. "But I am ready to be home, ready to see our children and grandchildren, ready to sleep in our own bed." Pierce smiled and took her hand. "Our own bed does sound pretty good right about now." They returned to find everything running smoothly, their children and the ranch hands having managed perfectly well without them. It was reassuring to know that the operations they had built could function independently, that they had trained people well and established solid systems. As they entered their 60s, both Pierce and Olivia began to slow down, not from lack of desire but simple physical reality. Pierce's knees bothered him on cold mornings, legacy of too many years in the saddle. Olivia's hands sometimes ached from arthritis, making kneading bread more difficult. But they adapted, found new ways to contribute, passed more responsibility to their children and grandchildren. Thomas took over primary management of the Northwood Ranch in 1918, with his father's blessing and guidance. He had grown into a capable man, with his father's work ethic and his mother's practical intelligence. He had married well, to a woman who reminded Pierce very much of Olivia in her younger days, and they were raising 3 children on the ranch. Emma and Grace both married in their mid-20s and stayed in the area, their husbands working as ranch hands for various operations in the region. Family gatherings were loud, chaotic affairs with children running everywhere and conversations overlapping, and Pierce and Olivia loved every minute of it. In 1920, Pierce and Olivia celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party that included seemingly half the population of Fort Yuma and the surrounding ranches. There were speeches and toasts, stories told and retold, laughter and a few tears. When Pierce stood to say a few words, he pulled Olivia up beside him and wrapped his arm around her waist. 40 years ago, I married the best woman I have ever known, he said, his voice still strong despite his 64 years. She has been my partner in every sense of the word, working beside me to build not just ranches but a family and a legacy that will outlast us both. She has given me 5 incredible children, more grandchildren than I can count sometimes, and a lifetime of love and support. If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing except maybe to marry her sooner. Everyone laughed at that, and Olivia blushed, pleased and embarrassed by the attention. When it was her turn to speak, she said simply, 40 years ago, I was standing in the rain with nothing to my name and no hope for the future. And then this cowboy came along and offered me a ride. He saved my life that day, and he has been saving it every day since by loving me so completely and building this beautiful life with me. I love you, Pierce Northwood, more than words can ever express. There was not a dry eye in the place as they kissed, and their children and grandchildren crowded around them, all wanting to be part of the moment. It was perfect, exactly what they had both wanted to celebrate this milestone. As they grew older, Pierce and Olivia spent more and more time simply enjoying each other's company. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, rocking in the chairs that William had made for them, holding hands and watching the sun set over land they had worked so hard to acquire and maintain. They would talk about the past, about memories both sweet and bittersweet, about all the people they had known and loved over the years. You ever think about that day in the rain? Pierce asked one evening in 1925. They were both 70 now, showing their age but still healthy and active. I think about it often, Olivia admitted. It was the worst day of my life and the best day of my life all wrapped up together. Worst because I had lost everything, best because it led me to you. I think about it too, Pierce said. I think about how easily I could have taken a different road, how I could have been in too much of a hurry to stop, how you could have refused my help. Any one of those things, and our entire lives would have been different. But they did not happen, Olivia said firmly. You took that road, you stopped, I accepted your help, and we built this life together. That is what matters, not what could have been, but what actually was. Pierce squeezed her hand. You are right, as always. I am a lucky man, Olivia Northwood, luckier than I ever deserved to be. We were both lucky, Olivia said. Lucky to find each other, lucky to have this time together, lucky to have built something that will last long after we are gone. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. Inside the house, they could hear their son Thomas talking to his wife, their grandchildren's voices raised in play. These were the sounds of continuity, of family, of a legacy that would endure. Pierce and Olivia lived well into their 70s, both remaining relatively healthy and active despite the inevitable effects of age. They watched their grandchildren grow up and start families of their own, becoming great-grandparents multiple times over. The Northwood name was well respected throughout the region, synonymous with quality cattle, fair dealing, and honest work. In the spring of 1932, Pierce fell ill with pneumonia. He fought it hard, but at 77, his body simply did not have the strength it once had. Olivia never left his side, holding his hand and talking to him even when he was too weak to respond. Their children gathered, bringing grandchildren and great-grandchildren to say goodbye. On a warm April morning, with Olivia holding his hand and their entire family surrounding the bed, Pierce Northwood passed away peacefully. His last words were, "I love you, Olivia. Thank you for saying yes." Olivia was devastated by the loss, but she was also grateful. Grateful for the 50 years they had shared, grateful for the family they had built, grateful for every single day they had been together. At the funeral, which was attended by hundreds of people whose lives Pierce had touched, Olivia stood strong, accepting condolences with grace and dignity. But alone in the house they had built together, she allowed herself to grieve fully. She would sit in his chair on the porch, holding his favorite hat, and cry for the man she had loved with her whole heart. Her children worried about her, but she assured them she would be fine. "Your father and I had 50 wonderful years together," she told them. "I miss him terribly, but I am not sorry for the grief because it is proof of how much we loved each other, and I know I will see him again someday." Olivia lived another 8 years after Pierce died, staying active and involved in the ranch operations even as her physical abilities declined. She was a beloved matriarch, sought after for her wisdom and her stories. Her great-grandchildren loved when she would tell them about the old days, about meeting their great-grandfather in a rainstorm, about building the ranches from nothing, about all the adventures and challenges they had faced together. In 1940, at the age of 82, Olivia Foster Northwood died peacefully in her sleep. Her children found her in the morning, lying in the bed she had shared with Pierce for so many years, a peaceful expression on her face. On the nightstand was a faded photograph from their wedding day. Pierce young and handsome in his best suit, Olivia radiant in her handmade dress. They buried her next to Pierce in the small cemetery on the ranch property, under a cottonwood tree that had grown from a sapling they had planted on their 10th anniversary. The stone read, "Olivia Foster Northwood, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and friend." She stood in the rain, and he offered her a ride. Together they built a legacy of love. Years later, their great-great-grandchildren would stand by that grave and hear the story of how their family began. They would hear about a young woman with nothing but hope and determination, about a cowboy with a kind heart and a strong work ethic, about a rainy day in 1882 that changed everything. And they would understand that sometimes the worst moments of our lives contain the seeds of the best moments, that kindness can change the trajectory of a life, and that true love, once found, can build something that lasts for generations. The Northwood Ranch still operates today, passed down through the family, a testament to what Pierce and Olivia built together. The Triple Bar eventually merged with the Northwood operation, creating one of the largest and most respected ranches in the region. But more than the land or the cattle or the buildings, what Pierce and Olivia left behind was a family united by love, strengthened by hard work, and bound together by the story of how it all began. Because on a rainy day in March of 1882, a woman stood at a crossroads holding everything she owned in a cardboard suitcase, and a cowboy on a bay horse stopped to help her, not knowing that in that moment, both of their lives would change forever. He offered her a ride when she needed it most. And in doing so, he offered her a reason to stay, a reason to hope, and a reason to believe in love again. Together, they proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments, and that a single act of kindness can echo through generations, shaping futures that neither of them could have imagined on that rain-soaked road so long ago.